Welcome to RPM's third quarterly podcast, our Q2 live stream. Sorry about that. Live stream. I am your returning champion. I guess I'm reprising my role as host. I'm joined by Dave, John, and Ryan. We come to you today with some exciting news, and I'm going to kick it over to John to first talk about. John, take it away.
Thanks, Sean. As many of you saw or read, that RPM is partnered with Trive Capital and Bluejay Advisors. They've taken on a majority share of the organization, and it's been really exciting the last few weeks. We had a town hall the other day to announce it to our employees, and it was received with a great response. And we've also spoke to our customers and carriers about the opportunity, and it's coming at the right time. There's high expectations for RPM to deliver even more than what we've been doing today, and we're really excited about it. As Barry, our owner and founder, said in the news clippings that this is going to really help propel us into the future, and the growth and the opportunities that are in front of us are really exciting. Before I kick it back to you, Sean, though, this is for Q2, and just want to say thank you to all of our employees. We've had tremendous success in Q2. There's been a lot of new customers, new carriers. There's been new integrations and new advancements in our technology, and we have come about as close as we have to hitting all of our OKRs and quarterly objectives for Q2. And just couldn't be more proud of the work that we've done here in this quarter. So thanks, appreciate it.
It's great to hear. And I'm glad you brought up Q2, because I do want to get into what we're seeing sort of on a macroeconomic scale across the market, especially on our vehicle side of the house first and foremost. It's no secret that the automotive industry has been through a lot over the last few years. I would say more than at any time since COVID, we're seeing a normalization of especially the new car industry or new vehicle industry. But obviously there's challenges and headwinds in that space. Interest rates remain very high for consumers. Vehicle costs have stayed elevated. Sales have remained strong, but we're also seeing inventory levels creep up across a number of brands and even OEMs on the aggregate across those brands. So it's going to be very interesting to see what plays out in the vehicle market over the next, really probably the back half of the year, I would say. Especially as we get closer to, an election. If the Fed doesn't do anything, I think that will only probably help our friends on the used car side as we think about, what we're seeing in the used car market. Depreciation continues, but we have more inventory coming into the used car market. Which is putting that downward price pressure, which is actually bringing consumers into the space. I mean, I was reading on Auto Remarketing's website this morning just about the interrelation of what's been happening in used car values, which are have steadied, which is a good sign, but have declined pretty substantially over the last several months. So. Add into that the EV narrative that's currently playing out in the news. You'd have to be living under a rock to not necessarily to miss all the talk of EVs, and is demand softening? Do consumers really want them? What's going to happen? But the fundamentals are that consumers demand for used EVs, especially because they come at a lower price point. Consumers are more willing to jump into them, but we're seeing used EVs seeing, crazy price declines in terms of the used car market. So that type of pressure that's going on, I think all leads to, it's really anyone's guess how it's all going to play out. But as we think about serving shippers who are both tasked with getting new vehicles out into dealer lots and in consumers' hands, and ultimately serving the remarketing or used car space, we're thinking about how to do that more intelligently for both shippers, if you will. and really how technology plays a massive part of that. And, I want to bring Dave into the conversation because as John mentioned, we've had, a lot of sort of technological innovation over the last quarter here that we've been very proud of. So I want to kind of kick it to you and have you talk a little bit about what we're doing on the tech side of RPM.
Man, a huge shout out to RPM IT at HQ. We have a ton of great devs out there and a fantastic data team. So I'm going to make a call out to my people. Yeah, we've kind of dipped into a few different things. We're starting to diversify and de-silo a lot of our data. From our perspective, from a technology standpoint, is our asset is the ability for us to communicate more rapidly, have better response times, track more efficiently, aggregate data, then bring it together and create like an entirely new model with which we can build the company around. Mm-hmm. I think in particular around some of the conversations we're going to have today, some of the things that are very top of mind for me are going to be around market impacts. And predictability within it. Fed rates are going to affect what we're doing. What consumer good growth is going to affect what we're doing. I think we're seeing a lot in the market today that's talking about stabilizing. The logistics is going to stabilize in the next 2 quarters, and our ability to be able to predict that, as well as the changes we're seeing in automotive, are going to allow us to be a lot more, or allow us to address things more rapidly. So being able to create that broad view perspective, but then also bring it back in-house and make sure that we're providing good customer service and enabling people to be more rapid to make better decisions is where we're focused.
Yeah, and I'd be remiss to not mention, like, next week we're going to Automotive Logistics Digital Strategies Conference, and I think, as we think about how technology enables people, I'm excited to engage with that community and understand how our customers are thinking about how technology enables their people, how technology plays with their vendors, and ultimately how we add value to the sort of supply chain of distribution of vehicles or getting parts into the manufacturing of vehicles, obviously.
And not to like fall too far into the weeds, but everything to me is a systems problem, right?
Yeah.
So when you get to actually talk to the customer about how their back end is built, being able to retrofit ours to match theirs makes us far more flexible and rapid in the market.
Yep. And, coming off of being at Finished Vehicle Logistics a couple weeks ago, a lot of the conversation there was around still challenges in the supply chain. I mean, we can talk about normalization or stabilization. We can talk about a vehicle market that's really become probably following more of the same trends we saw pre-COVID, with sort of a slower Q1, potentially a slower Q3 coming out of, planned shutdowns that are more akin to normal production schedules prior to COVID. But the challenges in terms of distribution still remain as we think about whether it be rail challenges, whether it be short sea vessel challenges. And, there's a ton of conversation around the West Coast and using places like Portland and Vancouver to get vehicles land bridged across the U.S. So all of that presents sort of I think of it as a Rubik's Cube that's also always changing for us. So as soon as we think we have it solved, there's a new challenge or a new combination that pops up. So
that's been my experience the few months that I've been here.
Yeah.
What I thought it was yesterday is not what it is tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think it's what makes, having technology to enable our people to solve those challenges so important, but also being laser focused on how technology can solve those sort of changing Rubik's Cubes alongside the people.
Yeah, and visibility. For me, everything kind of breaks down to, like, I'm a big gamer. I love playing video games. One of my favorite games in the world is...
I think it's a prereq for being in IT.
You kind of have to, right? Yeah. Actions per minute and twitch muscles. Yeah. But it really kind of boils down to, for me, businesses like this, markets and industries are video games. I want a good HUD. Yeah. I want to understand the economics of my business. I really want to understand how I can address rapidly the changes that are happening. I want to provide everybody here the ability to go virtualize the business and then make decisions as it changes from one day to the next.
Yep.
If we're not able to do that, and in order for us to do that properly, we really have to structure the data that we have and then serve it in the appropriate ways. and that's to people, not in place of people, right? So, and that's kind of the goal, is for us to democratize knowledge, create that HUD, and then let people go in and just build their own SimCity.
I love that game.
Yeah, 100%.
I want to bring Ryan in because we've actually been having this conversation around, not to completely switch topics from vehicle, but DFMs versus traditional freight brokerages, which is all over LinkedIn right now. And I think it really ties in nicely to what you were just talking about, which is like how technology and people sort of fuse together. Technology, not necessarily as a replacement of people, but as a enricher of what people can do to solve all of the nuance and challenges that we see in especially, non-asset-based transportation, where we're dealing with a multitude of different shippers shipping multitudes of different goods, right. And the carrier capacity is not one size fits all, especially in vehicle. So how we make that sort of all fuse together is really where, I think, I want to get your perspective on that for sure.
The most successful freight brokerage is going to be the traditional freight brokerage that has the freight that goes into the technology that a DFM provides. If you could fuse those together, it's going to be the most. You'll see the most success versus, say, a DFM's freight. Not necessarily always the most desirable out into the trucking community. Just pick up a newspaper, follow Andrew Silver on LinkedIn. You'll hear all about it. Just getting that mesh. So, right? Get that traditional freight, the brokerage, that freight from our type of brokerage into the tech. That's the most success you'll see right there.
Yeah, and John, you've been a champion of products like Marketplace and how we interact with carriers and understand capacity. I mean, when you hear Ryan talk about that, where does your mind go?
I mean, it starts with relationships. You don't get those shipments without having a relationship with the shipper, the trust from the shipper. You don't have the trust from the carriers that, you're going to have business for them that meets their needs without a relationship. And, for me, I don't need to go on LinkedIn or go anywhere to say it, but it's always been about the relationships, and the people aspect of this business gets lost a lot of times when people talk about, how to automate, how to digitize. Yeah. And all we're trying to do is just free up our people's time to give the people on the other side a better experience. And I think we're going down the right path. I know we're going down the right path. We've identified the areas that are non-revenue generating, that are really, tasks that humans shouldn't be doing. And, Ryan, is a great example. He started here about almost a half a year ago, and he's building relationships with people he's never met before because he's a great guy, right? And he enjoys working with people. But that doesn't happen when you just lead in with, I have a digital strategy, right? You need to build that out. It comes from people wanting to work with people. That's why we go to all these conferences. That's why we invest a lot of money in being where our customers are at, where our carriers are at, to talk to them about their needs, to understand them. And then we bring it back. We profile that information. We try to anticipate their needs if it's a shipment where they're going to be deadheading to, or we know that there's going to be an influx in their network because of upstream disruptions that are occurring. And those are the things that, I believe that the traditional brokerages have always had it right. And we're just now empowering ourselves to be able to do it more. We have no intentions of removing our people. We want to give them the ability to do more and focus on the exceptions, focus on the issues and problem solving. And, I think that's why people continue to choose RPM. And I think that's why we are, something just dropped. We got to deal with that. Something happened upstairs, but I mean, that's where I'm at on that.
It's hiring the best people, giving them the best training, and arming them with the best technology. Goes back to, shout out Jeff and Mary Ann.
Yeah.
Mark Ford, Tim King. Hopefully you're watching. But no, problems happen when you're out on the road, and having that one point of contact, being able to pick up Call them at their desk, call them on their cell phone, whatever it may be. It's the relationships are and will always remain paramount.
It's that classic Mark Cuban thing, right? Sales, relationships, and your network. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, and I think what we've seen in the freight market over the last couple of years, which has been, I don't want to say in a state of severe depression, but I'm sure there's people in the industry that are severely depressed about it. It's definitely, I think, brought to light, sort of and I'll quote John on this, the weaker getting weaker and the stronger getting stronger. And we've seen, obviously, the convoy stuff play out. We've seen, the transfix news. I think there are sort of these elements that are showing themselves as, in a down market, what do you really have to stand on as your differentiator when things, when it's a race to the bottom on price, when its capacity is potentially, seemingly abundant, and everyone's in a sort of enjoying the revenge of the shipper that continues. And how do we start to, position ourselves for, a change in that marketplace? And I think relationships are what you have to stand on, what you have to leverage, and how you nurture both carriers and customers to do that is really where you're going to make hay.
Yeah, just to add on to that, doing what you say you're going to do is going to be a winning strategy forever, right? I mean, it's going to always be a winning strategy, and being able to roll up your sleeves and get the job done if your marketplace didn't cover the shipment or your dedicated solution isn't there. And understanding when to pivot and when to pull back that strategy and realize that the optimal strategy is not playing out. And that's why it's really important that you rely on those relationships and the customers, the shippers that are paying for the freight. They expect you to make their lives easier, not harder. Mm-hmm. When you're going back to them and saying, my digital strategy didn't work, they don't care, right? They want their shipment to go from A to B in good condition, on time. And it's our job to figure it out, whether it's through automation, it's investing in more resources, headcount, whatever it is, that's on us to figure out. And I think we're doing a great job at it.
Plus, being in sales, I love the interaction. I truly enjoy the people that I work with. I've stood in weddings, I've gone to sporting events, fly across the country, gone on vacations with a lot of people that I've met in this industry that have been a shipper, a carrier, that a computer just can't replace that, man.
We got a question from Stephen B.
Uh-oh.
The question is, Sean, I want to bring this up. So Stephen B. asked, I'd love to know from the panel what each believe is the biggest technical challenge facing logistics companies today. You all have already kind of touched on it, but I guess you can reiterate.
Ooh, do you want me to? I'll start.
Oh man, I'm going to totally go last.
So the question is, what is the biggest technical challenge facing logistics companies today? As the customer-facing person, I'll advocate for how we interact with shippers. I think meeting customers technologically where they're at and how those two worlds mesh together and communicate is an ongoing challenge. I mean, we had Karen Berman on from who heads our integrations team on, I think the previous live stream or the first one. And she talked a lot about meeting customers where they're at technologically. And we have customers that are still using green screen like technology internally. And we've got to somehow transmit or pull data from that or take one bit of data and add all this ancillary data around it. And I know I'm swimming in Dave's pool right now, but creating, ingesting a little piece and enriching that data and being able to tell a story back to a customer is what I continue to think about.
100%.
How we can be a better service provider for our clients. And, that doesn't happen easily. So how we do that and how quickly we stand up an integration, how quickly our data gives them value back is really where rubber meets the road, and where it continues to be, I think, a big technological challenge in our industry.
That was good. For me, it's tracking. We've come a long way already.
Yeah.
I remember when I first started and I had a Post-it notes of just driver cells calling every 2 hours for location updates. But for me, I still don't understand, we track the truck, okay? But what if you're relaying or dropping, why don't we, how has somebody not created something this big that just goes into a pallet and we track the freight, what's inside the trailer? That's, and getting adoption, making sure that the drivers are clicking yes so that we're being able to track loads. If a customer calls me and says, where's my shipment? I want to be able to push one button and say, it's in Royal Oak, Michigan. We're trending well for delivery. Let's track the freight.
You want to go start a company?
Yeah.
Oh, I can touch on both of those. I do think, though, meeting the customer where they're at. So it's kind of funny because you talk about the kind of files we get. Some of the integrations that we have, or some of the customers that we work with, they're sending us fax files. That's kind of how far back this goes, right? But then we have some that want us to integrate with APIs. And what you start to realize is there's such a wide range and disparity in the different kinds of tech that we have to integrate with, the kinds of solutions that we have to do. Everything becomes about creating things at scale. Mm-hmm. And for me, it drills back to when we know we can communicate back to the customer right, we know that we're getting it right. And that is actually the biggest challenge. It's one of the things we're absolutely trying to address. And that's, I think you nailed it as well. Bring the data in, enrich it, serve it back to provide better insight to our customers. That is definitely the biggest lift that we have. I think it's where we're also focused today.
Yeah, I'm not going to have a uniquely different answer.
Yeah.
I think it's, there's paralysis from analysis. It's reducing the noise.
100%.
And, I think that's one thing that we need to continue to improve upon at RPM is giving customers digestible data that they can take action on.
Yeah.
Even with tracking, nobody wants to track the shipments that are on time. They just want to deal with the shipments that are not on time. And how do you give better dashboards? How do you give them better visibility to that? I think the biggest problem to kind of summarize it is just that there's so much information out there now. It's all at our fingertips, but trying to figure out where to start, where to take action, how to make the biggest improvement, where's the biggest ROI from your time spent, right? We're talking about reducing the non-revenue generating tasks, not for just RPM, but for our shippers, for our carriers, and there's demands, consumer demands that just drive a lot of this, and understanding what to do and where to start. And we need to continue to be a source of relief and make their lives easier when we give them. It's just this one shipment out of 20 that we need to be focusing on versus how do we handle all 20 of these at one time. So working on the exception management tracking, working on just how do we provide them with data that can be actionable for what they need to deal with it internally for both shippers and carriers.
This is actually the third brokerage industry I've worked in. I've been in data brokering, I've been in finance, and this is logistics. And one thing that I've learned is data is always king, just in the sense that it's our primary asset, how we communicate, how we get information back. Customer orders come to us, it's data. How we get information back to the customer, it's data. And there are no better consumers of data, I'm going to generalize, than sales. Here, you see that kind of divvied up into a number of different divisions. You've got customer sales, you've got carrier reps, you've got operations. Everyone's doing something that's a part of the full chain of delivery to the customer, enabling visibility, providing that HUD, virtualizing the video game, and shortening the distance between I have a request or I have something I have to deliver and I have a way that I have to communicate it for those individuals, means that everyone can move more rapidly.
And an anonymous question just came in, which is your favorite brokerage that you've been in?
Logistics.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure. Yeah.
You passed the test.
Wait, that was right? I work at, okay.
Yeah. You got it. You read the note card I gave you beforehand. Yeah, I mean, to play off a little bit of what you said, I think for me, the holy grail is returning value back to the customer based on the data they share with us, and also making it actionable in that we as a service provider see a portion of their network, but we also see a portion of a lot of different networks. And how we bring in, without maybe naming names or putting unique or identifying characteristics to that information to say, oh, that's so-and-so's information, but giving customers a more sort of macro view of the industry they're playing in, I think is also where we can really deliver value. Because in the vehicle world, there's only so many people that manufacture cars. They're all using the same infrastructure to distribute those vehicles, whether it's ports, railroads, whatever it might be, but they only know their world. And we know a little bit of their world, but we know a little bit of multiple worlds. And so when we can aggregate that together and say, hey, do you know that this is going on in this area of the world, or this is going on in this area of the world, and that world is more of a figure of speech. It could be just within North America, but that's where, I've been in more customer meetings than I can remember at this point, but they all want to know what's going on in the marketplace. What are other customers doing? What are even competitors in my direct industry doing? If in freight, it's a wider world, right? But if I'm sitting in an appliance manufacturer, they probably want to know what another appliance manufacturer is experiencing or dealing with. No different in vehicle when you're meeting with an OEM. So what are some other OEMs thinking about or doing? And that's really why FVL exists. That conference is for everyone to get together and kind of like.
Did I ever tell you what excited me about coming over to RPM? Have we ever had that conversation? It's actually really weird. So the first one is we are a non-asset logistics brokerage, right?
Last I checked.
But the thing that I actually really enjoy about it was when I was having the initial conversations, everyone kind of came back and said, oh, we're 100% cloud-based. And I went, really? Because I don't think I've actually ever worked anywhere, startups included, that were 100% cloud-based. So I was like, wow, you really took that whole non-asset thing, clean through the ethos of the company, and we don't have data centers, there's no infrastructure, there's no physical infrastructure.
Yep.
Shout out to Adam, AVJ, which is a really cool move. The second thing that got me really excited was exactly what you're just talking about. It was this concept of we see everything. We don't just have an integration with a single OEM. We do it on freight, we do it with vehicle. We're able to look at every OEM. And there's simple things about the way that they behave, the way that they function, and there's like an underlying pattern that they all have. And I'm really excited to get to the state to be able to see that. I don't know. I don't even know what we would do with it next, other than use it to be more rapid and actionable. I don't know if you can monetize it. I don't know if it opens up a whole new market, but I think very few people actually have that visibility into the market. And then the third thing, shout out to Seneca, is Seneca turned to me and said, I would love to see a finished vehicle come back through remarketing, and if that ever actually happens. And I don't think anybody has that sort of like length of view into the market. The idea that we could move a finished vehicle port to porch, love that, by the way, from point A to point B, and then start to understand the cycle time, the life cycle of when we see that VIN come back into the market from a remarketing standpoint, and why. I think starts to give very long legs into understanding like the totality of the market and where it goes. And I think that's when I identify that we're greenfield. We have a perspective into the market that nobody else has today, and we're tip of the spear. We're kind of blazing the trail. It brings its own challenges. But at the same time, that perspective, that potential is very impactful, and it's really exciting, especially I'm a data guy. At the end of the day, I'm a data nerd. I love the idea that I'd get to be able to see that in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think that on the carrier side as well, right, the trucking companies, that we see where there's inefficiencies, we see where there's deadhead, or there's an opportunity for 2 or 3 or 4 or sometimes 10 trucking companies to handle a bid, right? RPM receives a bid for, call it 100 shipments or 100 vehicles, and it makes more sense to bring 2 or 3 carriers together to fully utilize that that award. And so the same challenges that Sean, you're talking about, where the shippers wanting to know what the others are doing, I think it is our obligation. I think that's why we're all here. That's why we want to be in this industry, is to reduce the waste, to get the most competitive price possible, and give people the true cost, whether it's rate per mile or rate per VIN, that fully encompasses the I'm picking up from the closest origin and I'm going to the closest destination to where I need to be, so that everything is maximized. We don't want to waste fuel. We don't want to waste people's time. And the more that we can come together and really go through these data points like you're talking about, it's what we can do for the industry to make it better. Because carriers don't want a deadhead, right? They don't want to drive with nothing on their truck. Shippers don't want to pay for that. And the better that we can do to develop more relationships with carriers that are closer in proximity to where those shipments are going to be, understanding how often they're getting empty, and when those drivers come available, and matching that together is really where we're seeing our growth and we're seeing our competitiveness, but it's also allowing for us to make the industry better overall in transportation and logistics, not just freight, not just vehicle, but in the life cycle of all of it together.
100%. It's like brokering the brokers, right?
John, I'm glad you brought in the carrier community to the discussion. I mean, I think absent
the most important part.
Sometimes we get talking about what we can do for customers, and I'm definitely guilty of it. But yeah, when you were talking about, my mind immediately goes to vehicle, especially with the dynamic nature of the different equipment sizes, the shipping plan that shippers don't give you, which is just, here's 500 vehicles, you go figure it out. Mm-hmm. And all of the greenfield space that leaves you to get creative on how to drive efficiency. Absolutely. Is the opportunity in our space. I mean, because in freight, they're saying you pick it up at this place and you deliver it to this place. Like that is as two-dimensional as it gets. But I think for vehicle, there's a whole host of different, like you can arrive at an answer, which is all the vehicles get moved. But at the end of the day, solving that problem, you could put that in front of 10 different people and they'd give you 10 different plans on how to solve that challenge.
Right.
Because you have all this different equipment, especially in our case, at our disposal, if you will, to play matchmaker with. And how you deliver the outcome for the shipper is one of the goals, but equally as important is, to your point, maximizing the value for the carriers and who's the right fit for that business in that moment, for that scenario, makes it a much more dynamic game.
Absolutely. I mean, look, we talked about, do what you say you're going to do, and your say-do ratio. And
I think a guy that walks these halls likes to use that one from time to time.
I've never heard that before.
But we talk about it for shippers, right? If you don't get your shipment covered, you take a loss or you do whatever it takes to get it done. Yeah. The same thing on the trucking company side too. If a driver shows up and it's not readily available or they can't find something, you can't just turn a blind eye to those carriers. And I do think that's where the digital brokerages will always get it wrong, is that you need to be staffed with people to be able to help drivers when a shipment's not going to plan, and be there for them. So they want to work with you, because we have the same obligation to make their life easier, not harder, as we do as shippers. And, drivers are the lifeblood, right? They are what fuel America. It's what fuels our commerce. Nothing gets to your doorstep or onto your plate or under your tree or in your birthday presents. Nothing arrives without a driver involved. I know that there's drones and I know that there's other ways to get packages delivered, but it's still going to go onto a truck somehow,
if you bought
some way.
Come on, fill me in. If you bought it,
you got it.
A truck brought it. I served that up perfect for you.
But Ryan, I mean, you have extensive experience with trucking companies and drivers. What's been your kind of motto or values as it pertains to working with trucking companies? Why do they continue to want to work with you, like you were talking about earlier?
I mean, it's service. It's being there when there's something wrong. Sometimes these drivers sit in a truck all day, Maybe they get a little bit of interaction when they're filling up their pump, talking to the gas station attendant, and that's some of the only interaction they get all day. Just calling, checking in. Hey, how's it going? How's your day? Develop some pretty good personal relationships where I'm driving home from work and talking to a truck driver, and I look down at my phone and I'm like, oh man, it's been 30 minutes. We're just, kind of shooting the breeze. But at the end of the day, yes, just being able to solve their problems as quickly as possible, because time is money, and being able, just to be there for them. You're an extension of their sales force. You're generating revenue for them. Like, they need you just as much as we need them. So just making sure it's a two-way street. That relationship is built out of respect and trust. And at the end of the day, that's it. Whenever there's a problem, I used to always tell everybody that I'd ever train, it's a snowball, right? And it's a snowball going down a hill. You have this problem, it's this big, and if you just try to brush it off because you want to keep making calls on other loads to make money, and you're like, oh, it'll get figured out. Somebody will, figure it out. That snowball's going down the hill. By the time it gets down to the bottom of the hill, you got Frosty the Snowman. That problem's going to take forever to get, to get fixed. Yeah. So take care of that issue right away when it's this little snowball you can fit in your hand, and drivers will appreciate that, and they'll come back. They'll be returning customers. It's always, the best examples are these owner operators that pick up a load for you from point A to point B. They're empty, and you have loads in your network to immediately reload that truck. They work for you, and they work for you because you pay them fair, you treat them with respect, and you solve their problems the second that they arise.
Drivers, carriers, shippers, they have a choice, right?
They do.
And it's really on us to make sure that if they're going to choose RPM, that they are happy with that decision.
Yeah, and as you were talking, you talked a lot about, I think, sort of the little difference makers, but my mind went to, what is the reaction you get when you start to talk about what a carrier's network looks like and where the gaps are, and where's the power in that? Because I think that's where, and this is going to be a hook for Dave to come back into, is like, if the more you understand about where they want to be, what they want to be doing, like, where does that start to gain a lot more momentum as well? Because I know you've done that with large fleets. And
it's a great question. A lot, you go to them and say, how many salespeople do you have at your company? Usually the answer I'll get is, say, 1, 2, 3. Okay, well, I am an extension of your sales force. I am every day selling your trucks to the wide net of shippers that are working with, with RPM. I am able to take your trucks and sell them. And every day we get new RFPs, different lanes, and you get to a point where you just look at an RFP and you're like, oh, I just talked to John yesterday. I was in his office and he said he needed Detroit to Royal Oak every single day, and here it is on this RFP. We're giving them access to more customers, more shippers that they might not be able to get their foot in the door with. We're an extension of their sales force, and once you gain their trust and they don't look at you as just you're just a broker cutting 20% of my rate. Like 20%, like, give me a break. That doesn't happen anymore. You are working for them. You're an extension of their sales force. And when trucking companies understand that and realize that, the relationship can just go to the moon.
Yeah, and Dave, what do you hear when you hear that?
My immediate thought is what we're talking about with customers when we talk about meeting them at their level. Because not all carriers have the capability of having a system-to-systems integration, right? So how do we start to provide solutions for them where we're able to give them the same level of visibility, same level of communication? For some reason, when you were talking, I hate to say this, I was like, RPM, have it your way. But in a weird way, kind of. And that's what we were trying to do with Marketplace, right? Like, how do we present better information around what's available to them. And there's a part of it even anticipating what their needs are going to be within the route. So I'm going to make a Hussman call out as well. But one of the things that he really got me drilling down into were like intermediate stops, like interstitial stops, and not just for our own purposes like SLAs, but to better understand like how shipments are moving over time and what a carrier is going to have to deal with while we're in the middle of it. It lets us do things like anticipate problems for them, but it also gives us the ability to make sure that their truck's never empty while they're out. That's an area that I'm also pretty excited to drill down into. But for me, it all kind of goes back to the basics. Masters don't advance past the basics and never revisit them. It's about instilling the basics every day. So some of our initial initiatives are being able to like break apart the data, democratize it, present it for different audiences. And this is one of the areas I immediately go to is meet them where they're at.
Yeah, I think just to put a bow on it too, we're selective with our hiring, right? We've got 300 people who live out our core values every day, and we're kind of, we're not divulging the entire secret sauce of RPM, but we could share all of our secret sauce. It's because we have people that will make carriers and drivers and shippers want to work with us.
Yeah.
We receive business all the time when competitors fail or we're chosen not as the cheapest option. It's because the people we hire, they care about the people on the other side of the problem, whether it's a driver or it's a shipper or it's a vendor. And some companies will say that they do it, but then they don't have their say-do ratio, right? We'll bring it back. And that's, I think, one of the most proudest things I've experienced over the last 4 years of year-over-year growth has just been, it's been the people that we hire that take pride in what they do and give whomever it is that they're working with the best experience that they possibly can.
Can we get say-do ratio in our Q3 OKR?
Yeah. I think it's there every day.
Right, you're writing the measurable.
Yeah, I want to turn to our producers and I'm curious, do we have any other questions from the audience? I know we took one earlier and then we've just been riffing for a while. Probably not leaving a lot of space for another question. Oh, yes. So inquiry was regarding cross-border. Again, you'd have to be living under a rock to not hear all the news regarding Mexico and its ever-growing importance in terms of supply chain. It feels like the newest in vogue place for a lot of manufacturers to place more and more parts of their supply chain. We know there's challenges with getting vehicles that are manufactured down there out into the U.S. distribution channels. This is not a problem that's going away anytime soon. And we've recently invested in resources to start to really drive solutions for Mexico. But yeah, I think vehicle is going to be an ongoing dialogue with a lot of customers and how we solve that challenge because for those of you who don't know, most vehicles manufactured in Mexico were shipped via the rail out of Mexico, and that network has continuously experienced its challenges. And usually, if I put on my freight hat for a second, when intermodal can't keep up, usually the over-the-road carriers sort of pick up the slack. The problem is there's not a lot of over-the-road carriers to pick up the slack within Mexico. So how do we stitch together capacity in that marketplace, I think is going to be, kind of a thesis we're working through. But I don't know if anyone on the table's got any thoughts on that or.
I think in most cases, the last thought of part is logistics and transportation.
Yes.
And so the demand, right, is very high. It's far exceeding the supply of capacity for Mexico for vehicle and in a lot of cases freight as well, for inbound and outbound. And, all all of the principles that we talked about throughout the conversation of building relationships and profiling the carriers and understanding what their tendencies are, what their needs are. Same for shippers. That's happening every single day. We're happening with our team that's based down in Mexico, as well as here in Royal Oak, led by Brian Hussman, you mentioned earlier. And a lot of profiling, a lot of prospecting. And, we did the same thing in Europe, right? We started about 4 years ago, I think just before COVID in Europe. And non-asset-based solutions were relatively unknown or unheard of in the vehicle space in Europe. And over the last few years, we've done exactly what we talked about throughout this entire live stream, which is building the trust, building relationships, being patient, understanding that RPM might be new to them, non-asset-based might be new to them, and building up that trust with a test shipment or a few last-second shipments because everybody else has failed. And fortunately for us, we've got a lot of sweat equity already built in with U.S.-based companies that need help down in Mexico, and so they're coming to us and they're relying on us. And extremely excited about our capabilities to handle cross-border shipments and bring in relationships that were primarily freight and introducing them into vehicle and vice versa. And that whole network is allowing for us to, I think, be pretty competent and competitive right away in some of these new opportunities that Mexico is producing. I just saw 60 Minutes, I don't know if it was last Sunday or the Sunday before, that talked about an underinvestment that's happening in China. And they're concerned about what that's going to mean for the overall dependency on China for the U.S. And maybe it's because of it's an election year. Maybe it's because there's other warning signs out there. But that is going to shift towards Mexico even more. And we've got, I'd say another 3 to 5 to 10 years of a lot of exciting times south of the border.
Can I ask a crazy question?
Sure.
I love being the dumb guy in the room. I just want to annotate this with, I do know why, but I don't know that our viewers do. Why Mexico has opportunities and why it's important. I'm sorry.
Are you posing the question to me?
I am posing the question to you.
I think proximity tends to be everything. Obviously, avoiding putting things on a vessel and the lead time that comes with that, if you manufacture something in the Orient, is a built-in win for the supply chain. I think the ability to put eyes and hands on what's going on in the supply chain with a relatively quick flight and with a country that's probably potentially more transparent than the one it's coming from is probably another.
I was always fascinated by the central landmass problem during quarantine, right? Because we couldn't get things overseas. So there's been a lot of relocation down to Mexico.
Yeah, and I think it probably, from a infrastructure and government alliance standpoint, I think there's probably more opportunity for our government to support their government in establishing the critical infrastructure that's needed to support all of this investment. Where I'm not a geopolitical expert by any means, but I would say, China's country and the way they run it is fundamentally different than the United States. And to think we would influence how they might support any sort of investment in their country is, challenging. But I feel as though Mexico is much more akin to being willing to work with
And
our state, if you will.
my interface that I think is kind of interesting is I've been digging around to kind of see what's available to us from the ability to create that visibility, and it's actually very limited. So being able to kind of work with both our carriers and our customers to get better information, process it, and structure it appropriately, then I think that'll give us much more visibility into it. But again, it feels and I feel like I keep coming back to this, it's a very greenfield market for us.
Yeah.
We're kind of blazing the trail, tip of the spear, and kind of opening it up and bringing visibility into it.
For sure.
Yeah, I think the dependency on China in regards to manufacturing has been going on for the last couple decades, and
the
pandemic, the way the governments ran, all of that has brought in an opportunity to look at Mexico as a different provider,
right,
to afford us with an alternative solution. I mean, it's hard to compete with China and what it costs to have something manufactured, but all of the downtime, the lack of control, like Sean talked about, the proximity to the United States, people are starting to wonder, is it better to have it manufactured somewhere else because of all of those factors? And even if you pay a little bit more money, would you rather have more control or be able to have it expedited, a couple thousand miles versus waiting on it, tens of thousands of miles?
And I find that fascinating. That's like getting back into being able to look at all of our customers and see them across the spectrum and understand what the underlying problems are. Being able to anticipate that suddenly opens up and bridges new markets for us.
Yeah.
I think we're coming closer on time, so I want to try to talk about what we have in terms of looking forward. We've recapped a lot of Q2. I mentioned we're going to be next week in Nashville at Automotive Logistics Digital Strategies Conference. Again, looking forward to engaging a ton of our OEM partners down there, and really kind of the vehicle world at large regarding what everyone's thinking about from a digital strategy perspective. I'm really pumped to get our CIO, Rick Grubb, down there and have him work the room. We also have a contingent that's going to be at Used Car Week Canada up in Toronto next week. Engaging with the Canadian market, which is a market we serve every single day, one that we want to serve more of. And obviously, there's plenty of used cars in Canada, and that has its own unique market dynamics. And I think we want to also plug more into that world as well. So we have a good group going up there. And then if we look even further down the road, we have, kind of, I don't want to call it the Super Bowl, but kind of the Super Bowl in our backyard, the Automotive Logistics Supply Chain ALSC Detroit. That'll be happening, which is really a huge blend of the freight and vehicle world coming together. It's the entire automotive ecosystem, which, we serve both sides of the house. So it feels like a home game for sure, in more ways than one. So those are kind of what we have on the horizon. And obviously we have, we're going to be out meeting with clients, especially, coming out of the shutdown, and looking forward to kind of what they're projecting in the back half of the year, especially with all the confluence of factors that are going on across not only the supply chain, election year, on and on and on. So it's going to be an exciting second half. So I can't wait for what our Q3 live stream will, what the relevant topics will be hitting on and what may be relevant in the moment, but stay tuned for that. And I think that's going to conclude. Do we have a last parting thing we want to get in? Do we want to go around the horn real quick?
It's been fun.
Knowing that you're a non-golfer, Sean, I won't hold it against you that you overlooked the RPM golf outing on Thursday, August 1st.
Yes.
There's still a few spots left for our customers, for our carriers. You can reach out to Drew Sherman, our head of marketing at RPM, if you're interested in joining us. We'd love to have you. And I'll just say that it was a great time talking with all of you today. I was promised that time would fly by, and it did.
It really did.
Yeah, it flew by. But I think that at the end of the day, we're really proud of what we're building here, and we're excited about the investment from Trive and Bluejay. And we didn't get to give them a whole lot of face time today in regards to what they bring to RPM. But Bluejay is a focused transportation and logistics investor. Their portfolio is entirely comprised of trucking companies and companies that support the transportation logistics industry. And, it's been great working with Pierre Mathieu and just the wealth of knowledge that he brings. And then on Trive Capital on the other side, they are, roll up your sleeves, operationally focused, get in the arena type of investor. And Andrew Frank over there has been, it's been really great. We loved introducing them to our organization. One of our core values is transparency, and we were transparent with the entire organization of why this is great for them and why this is great for our shipper and carrier community. And so I think looking ahead to Q3, we'll have a lot of great things, even more to talk about, and I'm really excited for it.
Great.
Say-do ratio.
Say-do ratio. That's how we're going to close it out. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you
you.
for joining.
Thank you.